Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. In my last video, I talked about two podcasts that were put out by Marvel that were focusing on the creation of the character of Captain Marvel from 2012 onward, and the creation of a community around that character in order for them to sell that character. Now, in that video, I focused on the first of the two podcasts mainly, which had the three people who were the driving force behind the creation of the new Captain Marvel. But in this podcast, what I'm going to focus on is that community itself, and take a deeper look at what that community looks like out of the mouths of the people who are the driving force behind that community today. And I think it's very important to do that because, first of all, they have a massive impact on the comic industry, and second of all, I really think that if you take a deep look at this community, it is something which is, in my estimation anyways, something that you should really be wary of. So first off, I'll put the link in the description for both of those podcasts if you wish to go listen to them. I'm concentrating on the second of those two podcasts, which again were put out by Marvel itself. And what I'm going to do is give you quotes from that podcast. And it's an hour long, so I'm only going to be selective in the quotes that I use. And it's going to sound like a little bit of a hodgepodge of quotes from this podcast, but I'm going to tie them together at the end as what this community looks like as a whole. So, to begin with, we have 5 people in this podcast. You have the 2 people who run the podcast, which would be number 1, Sana Amanat, who is the Vice President of Character and Content Development at Marvel and is basically the second in command at Marvel Comics. And we have Judy Stevens, who is the person who actually works for Marvel, who interacts with this community the most. I think she is the person that ties that community to Marvel itself, because it's not a standalone community. Marvel, as a company, actually supports this community. And they are interviewing 3 people, 2 women and 1 man. Now, I'll have to describe these people just up front, because these 2 women, all 3 of them actually, are steeped in identity politics, are steeped in feminist intersectionality. That's the kind of speech that they use. You have one woman, she keeps referring to herself, and this is her referring to herself, as being a large, bisexual, black woman. And she talks about this over and over again, and she talks about how she is discriminated against and how she feels like an outsider because of all of these intersectional things that she is, and she even at one point bursts into tears talking about how she feels excluded because of all of these intersectionalities that she has going on. And the guy who is in this interview, he is someone, he talks about his background, and he talks about being surrounded by women. He doesn't mention any male role models in his life at all. And when he speaks to the women around him in this podcast, he always does it in an apologetic way. He's always apologizing. He's always bowing his head like, oh, thank you very much for letting me, a man, be on this podcast with you superior people who are women. That's the way that the words come out of his mouth. So these are the people that they're interviewing, and these are 3 people from around the world who are really the main supporters of this community set up around Carol Danvers' Captain Marvel. And the community's name is the Carroll Corps. Now, as I said, Judy Stevens, who works for Marvel, and one of the people who is doing the interviewing, she is also heavily into the Carroll Corps. And I'm going to give you a quote from her first. She says this: "We have come together from sort of like through the internet, through social media. We have built a community that has transcended that, right? We are friends outside of the internet, and I think that's the end game of this world, right?" All right, so we have Judy Stevens giving a brief description of this community. Now, in my last podcast, I talked about the person who set up this community to begin with in 2012, which was Kelly Sue DeConnick, the original writer of this Captain Marvel, and she set it up through message boards, which had moderators. Moderators, of course, which were there to make sure that people only spoke the things that they should be speaking in these boards. And I'll get back to that point in a minute. So what Judy Stevens is talking about here is that this community started on the internet. It started on social media, but now these people all get together in real life. You have them talking about getting together to knit, getting together to do crafts, getting together to do cosplay, getting together because someone is going to have a child, meeting each other at Comic-Cons, and roaming around in packs of people dressed like Captain Marvel, all of these things. So they have brought it into the real world. It's not just something that's on social media and the internet anymore. So then we have Sana Amanat, again, second in command at Marvel Comics, describing this community. And just by the way, when I read stuff that Sana Amanat speaks, she speaks in a very odd way. She continually starts a sentence and then stops halfway through and then starts a new sentence. It's not me, it's the way that she speaks. So this is her quote. Yeah, I think that the message is what? The message of the Carroll Corps community is really what has brought people together. And it's different to different people. All right, so we have Sana Amanat here. And what does she say the core of this community is? Well, it is a message. And she says that message is different for different people, but it's a message. So that's what Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, is. She is a message, okay, because they center this community around Captain Marvel. It's the Carroll Corps. And Sana Amanat equates that character with the message. Now, this is by no means the first time she has ever done this. She does this all the time, and I've covered a number of interviews where she says things like this. She sees the characters in Marvel Comics as being messages, as being ideas. For her, they are ideas in a mask, and they're there, in her words, to push ideas. Now, when I say in a mask, I don't mean their mask is their superhero mask. I mean, these are literal messages and ideas in the mask of being a character. Because what those quote-unquote characters are supposed to do are supposed to be messages that push ideas. In her words, push positive ideas, but that's still pushing ideas. And so that's what she sees this community as centered around. That's what she sees Carol Danvers, as a message. All right, so we go on to a few others talking about what that message is to them. One of the cosplayers says this: for me, it felt like it was a very positive return to the early 90s girl power. It felt like being in the coolest girl gang ever. All right, you'll notice when I do these quotes that it's all about the feels. These people, it all comes from feeling. All right, that's where everything comes from. Emotion, feeling, it's all about the feels for these people. But if we look at what she's saying itself, what she says the message is, she says it in two different ways, but it's really whittled down to one thing. It's about power. She's talking about, in one sentence, girl power, and then the other being in a girl gang. So it's about power, girl power, to this woman. And then we have another quote from Judy Stevens. And this is what she says: it's just part of our lives. But it's not until we take a step back and we realize how important this community, like this one character, has become this important element for all of our lives. I mean, you know, we're literally on the precipice of the rest of the world really coming to know her. But we created the groundwork for the community. And the young girls and the young boys who are going to go, and kids and adults and teenagers who are going to go and see this film, we are going to be welcoming them with open arms. All right, so here we have a statement from Judy Stevens, basically saying that this community is set up and it's going to be ready for an influx of people because of the Captain Marvel movie. Now we'll get back to that in a minute or two. But what I want to focus on is Sana Amanat's reply to that statement which I just read. Sana Amanat's reply to that is, yeah, you've created a virtual safe space. Now, just let that sink in for a minute. These people always try to put a positive spin on things, but what do you have when you have an actual safe space? Because this is what she calls it, a safe space. A safe space is a place where you can't speak your mind, where you don't have free speech. A safe space is somewhere where you can't have conflict, where you can't upset other people. This is what I was talking about before. This community was originally set up on message boards on the internet with moderators, and you could only have approved speak. And here you have Sana Amanat confirming that with her statement that they've created a virtual safe space. Because if any of you know anything about a safe space, it is a place where you cannot speak your mind. You have to walk on eggshells around everybody else so you don't hurt their feelings, especially with your words. That means that in this community, there is a limit to your speech and there is a limit to what you can say and think. Quite specifically, that's what a safe space does. Then we have one of the cosplayers, and she says this: "Our culture is so dark right now. It is a black pit hole. Being able to look at heroes who are capable of choosing what's right out of hard decisions and follow through on that, and to be able to really champion things that people won't really be willing to champion." And then everybody on this podcast agrees with her wholeheartedly. So let's look at this statement for a second, all right? Why is our culture so dark right now? Now, this is something that comes up over and over and over again in these podcasts. Well, it's because of the last election, all right? Trump is someone, he's like he who shall not be named. They never name him whatsoever. But from what they say, and if you listen to any of these podcasts, you know exactly why they think that, as she says here, our culture is so dark right now. It's because these people lost the last election. It's because when people were given the choice, when people were presented with all the progressive ideas in the last election, the country said, no, we don't want those. And that brought America, in the minds of these people, into a new dark age. This is really what they think. So when she talks about these characters in these comics making hard decisions and following through with them, even though people won't really like them, what is she talking about? Well, she thinks that right is progressive. In the minds of these people, what is right is what is progressive. And those progressive ideas are pushed by these characters, even though the majority of people have already shown that they don't want them. And then the second cosplayer gets back to the message, and she says, it's having power, but choosing kindness and selflessness. Now again, I'll get back to that quote in a minute. But then we have Sana Amanat right after that saying, there is a lot of darkness outside. And the biggest thing is just, like, don't be terrible. Be kind. And try to have empathy. For me, that's why I love our heroes. Again, here we have Sana Amanat, bringing it all back to emotion. And you have to remember who this woman is. She is the VP of Content and Character Development at Marvel Comics. All the content and the character development go through her. What she is talking about here is that the heroes at Marvel are heroes because they have empathy. Now, I have done a number of videos where I have stated my case for the fact that Marvel became great because it was stories about heroes. And a hero in Western civilization for the last 3,000 years is a paragon of virtue. That's what a hero is. Even if it's just stuck in the back of everybody's minds, it's stuck there because it's been that way for 3,000 years. And virtues like justice and courage, those qualities are brought out in your hero because he has a correct understanding of reality. That is to say, he's prudent, because that's another virtue, and it controls all the rest. All right? All of this and the creation of an actual hero, it doesn't have anything to do with empathy. And you certainly don't build a hero on empathy. You might have a hero who's empathetic, but that's not how you build a hero. But in Sana Amanat's mind, who is the one who controls the content and the character development at Marvel Comics, that's how you build a hero. Through feels. That's how she thinks that you build a hero. And then we have one of the cosplayers saying, and then there's Brie Larson. She's a hero herself. She's someone, like Carroll, who isn't afraid to say the word and take the heat. All right, so let's look at that for a second. Because you have this woman saying that Brie Larson is saying things that people don't like and she's taking heat for it, but she's still out there saying it. Now, if we go back to what this cosplayer had said a few minutes ago, talking about what is right and making hard decisions and following through on them even though people don't really like it, well, what is she describing? She is describing what Brie Larson is doing right now. Brie Larson, who is talking about this movie being based upon, as she said in one of her interviews, intersectional feminism. All right? These are ideas that people don't want to hear about. And she's taking heat for saying these ideas. But this cosplayer, she's saying that these are the right ideas. These progressive ideas are the ones that need to be put out there. even though the majority of people don't want to hear it. And remember, when she made that statement, everybody in the podcast agreed with her. So then we move on to this group of people talking about what the character of Captain Marvel actually means to them. Because what they're doing in all of these podcasts is they're saying, describe Captain Marvel in your own words. And so one of these people says that Captain Marvel has badass swagger. Another one describes Captain Marvel and says, nothing is going to get in her way. And then another one says, she is unapologetic. Now, this is really the lens through which you need to look at all of these other quotes. Because not just here, but in a number of podcasts and a number of different interviews as well, I've seen people describe Captain Marvel. They would be people like Stephen Wacker, who helped create this character. He used the word mighty to describe her. And there's no shock in him saying that because he's the one who put the tagline above Captain Marvel as Earth's mightiest hero, and is quoted as saying that she's not Earth's mightiest female hero, she's Earth's mightiest hero. All right? And then you have people like the directors of Captain Marvel and Brie Larson herself talking about Captain Marvel being both powerful and unapologetic. So through all of these quotes, you see the word power used over and over again. That's what these people think Captain Marvel is about. Unapologetic power. And if that is what Captain Marvel is about for these people, and the community is built around Captain Marvel, really the message of this community, what the entire community is built around, is unapologetic power. These people, when they look at this character, that is what they think this character is about. Even Sana Amanat. I would say the majority of people who read comics, when they look at a superhero, they look at the hero part, and that's what they concentrate on. But not these people. They concentrate on the super part, on the power part, and how if you have that much power, you can use it unapologetically. Again, that is the core message of this community. And how do you use that unapologetic power? Well, what you do is, as they were saying in a couple of these quotes, you enforce those progressive ideas, whether people like it or not. And you make the world a better place, because right now the world is a dark pit of a hole. As Sana Amanat said, there's a lot of darkness outside. You make the world a better place, you make the world a lighter place by enforcing with your unapologetic power these progressive ideas on people, whether they like it or not. And the really scary thing about this, the really insidious thing about this community is, again, what Judy Stevens, who works for Marvel, says that this community wants to do now. What they want to do is stand there with open arms to accept all the young girls and all the young boys and the kids and the teenagers who go and see the Captain Marvel movie and want to know more about Captain Marvel. These people and this community with this message is going to create a safe space for them to come and be taught that it's all about your feelings. There are people out there who make the world a dark place because they hurt your feelings. And how do we get around that? Well, we take unapologetic power and we make the world a quote-unquote better place by enforcing these progressive ideas on them, whether they like it or not. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about this community. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.